If getting excited about watching your team play in pre-season is illegal, then take me away, officer. Lock me up. Throw away the key, because there was a lot to get excited about in Thomas Frank's first game in charge of Tottenham Hotspur yesterday. A 2-0 victory against Reading, and we're going to break down everything we learned from that game yesterday in this video. So if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. If you're already a subscriber of this channel, you know this is what we did all throughout pre-season last year, and we're going to be doing it again this year as we look ahead to Thomas Frank's first season in charge. And if you enjoy the video, make sure to like it for me. We're going to be talking about new patterns of play, new build-up structures as well, on and off the ball structures, which individual players excelled in this system. Thomas Frank platforming and profiling players correctly in roles to make them thrive and play to their strengths. And that is something that we spoke about a lot going into the season around Thomas Frank's appointment. That is something that he does. That pragmatic nature in which he plays isn't negative. It's not boring. It's about platforming players correctly to succeed, putting them in roles that actually suit their biggest strengths. And that is what we saw a lot of yesterday. We're obviously going to talk about the individual performances of Mohammed, Kudus, Luka, Vuskovic, who both excelled yesterday on debut. And there is no better feeling, really, than when a new player comes in, especially if they're a young player or a new signing, and hits the ground running straight away. And that's exactly what we saw from both of those two. But we're going to talk about that later on in the video. The first thing I want to talk about is obviously how Spurs kind of set up and what looks different under Frank on first impression compared to Ange Postecoglou. Now, obviously, this was the lineup the Spurs started with yesterday. It was two different sides, one half to another. There was no substitutions in either half, so it was the 22 players that got out there yesterday. We're going to see probably a little bit more rotation and flexibility as we look ahead next week to Luton with some more players coming back. There was no Gray involved yesterday, no Tell, no Odebear. Those three had obviously just come back from the under-21 Euros, given more time off than anybody else. Obviously, we've still got players coming back from injury as well. No Richarlison, for example, yesterday, who actually was left out. Apparently, it wasn't fitness related, so that's interesting obviously to see. And we saw some players that were on the bench yesterday that didn't get any game time either. But this was the team that we started with in the first half. More of a 4-2-3-1 setup, kind of reverting back to more of a traditional setup under Thomas Frank. Kinski in goal, Romero and Danso as the centre-back partnership, Porro, Udogie, Benton, Corsar. Alfred Devine started, Mikey Moore on the left, Johnson on the right, and Solanke through the middle. This is what it looked like more so in build-up, and we've got a ton of examples to show you in this video, the kind of shift from the way that we play out from the back under Thomas Frank compared maybe to Ange Postecoglou, and that is something that left us quite vulnerable at times under Ange, and that is something that I spoke about. Obviously, both managers in Ange and Frank, and we will get away from kind of comparing the two, but it's fresh in the mind. It's the first game of a new era, so to speak. So I think it is kind of good to sort of look back and look ahead to what we might do differently. And there is a kind of stark difference, really, in terms of how certain players are being used and structurally how we're kind of building up. More of a 3-2-5 shape. It's a little bit reminiscent of what Roberto De Zerbi did at Brighton, a bit of a 4-2-4 in very deep build-up, and then when you do progress through the thirds, you kind of revert to more of a 3-2-5 shape, which is kind of incredibly common in modern football, to be honest, especially with the fact that the 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 is probably the most commonly used system in the Premier League. And obviously, I think we're going to see Thomas Frank tinker and change things from time to time. But I think yesterday was a very good indicator of what you're going to see mainly from Spurs. And one thing that we saw in build-up was kind of reflected here in the average positions. If we go and have a look at this in the first half, what you saw was Romero and Danso obviously kind of as that base, Udogie high and wide, kind of pushing on. Porro far more reserved, actually, in terms of his involvement going forward. Sarr and Bentancur kind of as that solid base. Mikey Moore coming in off that left-hand side into that half space, that pocket. Johnson holding the width on the right-hand side, and then obviously Solanke leading the line. And I think you can see the picture so clearly in terms of what Spurs are trying to do, play out from the back in this first game. You saw it so much in that first half. And again, it massively suits a lot of the players that we've got in that squad, especially a lot of those players that were out there playing in that first half yesterday. Obviously, that's not when the goals came. It's not when Spurs took the game away from Reading. But it was really encouraging to see those kind of principles and the structure in which Thomas Frank wants to play kind of exhibited. And we actually saw a lot of crossover from what he was doing at Brighton. Low and slow kind of build up, enticing Reading to press, kind of in that 4-3-3 shape in which they were playing, getting them to kind of come and press high up the pitch, low and slow build up, moving it around to try and manipulate that press to find pockets of space and then be direct and aggressive when going forward. And that is what we saw a lot of in that first half. You can see here, it was Porro, Romero and Danso kind of tucked into that back three, Sarr and Bentancur as the pivot ahead of them. And what Spurs did a lot of the time was, again, this sort of low and slow build up. But what we did also was utilise Pedro Porro's ability to get that ball forward quickly, directly. His long passing ability is very good. It suits Solanke's game, playing with his back to goal, being used kind of a hold-up striker, and then you had Moore and Devine kind of operating as 2 10s to play off him, and that's what we did. Porro, long pass here, the first example that we've got to show you, which was 18 minutes into the game. Solanke kind of holds it up here, tries to get away from the centre-back. Spurs counter-press effectively. We do concede a free kick here, but again, it shows you, again, we've got some other examples to show you, but one thing that we're going to look at is kind of the variance in which we would build up, even if it was in a similar structure. Sometimes we go long, sometimes we play through the thirds, sometimes we go out wide and be more aggressive and direct that way, or as in this case, we'd go long, try and hit Solanke and play off him, and that is again something we saw with Frank at Brentford. One thing to note kind of in this example as well, and there's a few more that we're going to show, is that structure off the ball. Like when we do go long or we do go direct and we've got the ball up to Solanke or more kind of in that pocket maybe driving forward, is that when Spurs lose the ball, when Reading win it back, Bentancur and Sarr kind of as that base, and Danso kind of stepping up at times as well, provide a solid base to make sure that we don't get hit on the counter-attack, but also very aggressive in terms of trying to win the ball back. And that is, again, something Frank spoke about quite a lot. That aggression, that ability to be brave. It's not just about attacking and going forward. It's about winning that ball back as quickly as possible and sustaining that pressure, right? So if we go back here to kind of the start of the game, you can see it straight away. Danso here, Spurs building up throughout the thirds. Again, you can kind of see that 4-2-4 shape in build-up. A doggy out wide here, Romero and Danso again. As the deeper Spurs get, the more it does kind of morph into more of a 4-2-4. But as Spurs build up kind of higher up the pitch, you definitely see more of a 3-2-5 shape. And you can see that kind of evolve throughout the examples we're going to show. Danso into Bentancur and Udogie in that bit of space being used as that outlet at left back, kind of Spurs using a bit of an elbow back four, like I said, with the 3-2-5, Porro tucking in, allowing Udogie to do what he does best and use that energy, use that engine that he's got, that running power. And it was so good to kind of see him back super fit and sharp yesterday, because obviously Udogie is a player that massively struggled with injury last season. He definitely got going towards the end of the season, but I massively feel like this role is going to suit him. There are areas of his game I think he needs to improve if he's going to be a guaranteed starter every week, which I think he obviously will. But I think, for example, as we kind of go through the examples, you'll see crossing opportunities that he may have from deeper positions. That's not necessarily something that he excels in. He's more of a fullback that wants to create chances through cutbacks, getting to the byline. And I do think that is something that needs to kind of maybe be addressed in the squad building if we are to go and buy another left back or a left-sided centre-back that can maybe play that sort of hybrid role, someone who is better at kind of crossing from deep when Spurs get into those positions, to make ourselves less and less predictable in the final third. But it was really great to see him kind of be used in a role that massively does suit him. And again, I feel like he is a player, just like Pedro Porro, who is going to thrive massively in the way because of the way that they are actually being used. You see Udogie driving forward here, lures the man in, little 1-2 with Dom Solanke. Obviously, you can see that nice little bit of rotation with Moore kind of then going into the striker position, playing. You can see here Solanke kind of comes out, draws that centre back with him. Moore then goes to occupy the defenders on that last line. Solanke takes two players out of the game here, feeds that ball through back to Destiny Udogie, tries to get that cross in. You can see Johnson obviously there doing what he does best, limited involvement in build-up, but hanging on the shoulder of the last defender there. The left back, left-sided centre-half. Johnson find that pocket of space, or that big bit of space really, to kind of come in and attack the box. Again here, a couple of minutes later, you see Spurs building out from the back. Kinski. One thing I really like about Kinski, and it's something that I've always kind of spoken about in his build-up play, is that disguise on his passing. The passing range that he does have, I think, shows that he is going to compete with Vicario maybe a little bit more than we think. And I think he could be a real weapon in this Thomas Frank team, given that range of distribution, both short and long, as we know that Thomas Frank likes to be direct, aggressive. A lot of the time, that low build-up, that slow, patient build-up, is to draw the team in, the opposition team in, to press, to create gaps to play through, but also mean that you can be a bit more direct and go a bit longer if you want to. And then you kind of find yourselves in a 4v4 situation at times where you're then running at the defender. And I think Kinski's ability to do that unpredictability in his passing range, is going to be a real weapon for Frank. I do believe that. And you can see here, the defenders split, Romero and Van de Ven. Kinski finds a lovely little pass into Bentancur here. Again, obviously, what we spoke about so much when we did the initial video of how Thomas Frank might set up is having that secure base, that double pivot, gives us so many more options when we're trying to play out from the back compared to maybe under Ange. Obviously, it was a lot braver, you could say. to kind of have that single pivot in there. But it felt like when we were trying to build out from the back with Ange in this kind of way, where maybe Kulusevski was kind of playing as a 10, even Sarr here in more of a double pivot with Bentancur in more of a traditional 4-2-3-1 setup in this game, was still a lot further forward. It was Bentancur a lot of the time, or Bissouma, tasked with that single kind of pivot role in build-up. And it kind of meant that things had to go really perfectly and smoothly a lot of the time. It was very high risk, high reward. And we actually got a goal from this example against Man City. But you might be taking slightly less risk here, potentially kind of building up in this shape. But it does give you so many more options. It really, really does. Bentancur here out wide to a doggy again, kind of that spare man on that left-hand side. Little channel ball into Solanke. Spurs, again, you can see Johnson here attacking that back post. Doesn't quite work out for him. But again, as Spurs in another example, kind of build up through the thirds. Higher build up. We're in Reading's half this time, obviously pinning them back a little bit more. Romero here, playing the ball out to Destiny Udogie. Good line-breaking passing. As we know from him, more gets to the byline. But look at how effectively Spurs counter-press and win this ball back. Bentancur jumps in, wins that ball. Spurs can sustain the pressure, gets it to Solanke. We move it about, try and play through that Reading back line. Doesn't quite work out, and we give a foul away. But again here, you see it clearly. 3-2-5 in build-up. Sarr and Bentancur, Porro tucking into that back three. Spurs patient and slow in their build-up, just moving Reading around, manipulating that press, trying to find that little bit of space. Romero putting his foot on the ball, being that orchestrator, that conductor at the back, in the kind of central centre-back role in a back three, something that massively suits his game. You can see again here, happy to go back. Then we kind of transition more into that 4-2-4 shape. Again, Kinski into Bentancur. Just about kind of like moving them around, trying to find different angles of space. Porro goes more back into a traditional right-back role here, but what we see so often, Romero kind of bouncing that pass into Bentancur, first-time ball around the corner, and then into Sarr, who moves really cleverly kind of into the space as Reading move them about, and then we can kind of move up really nicely through the thirds. Really good from Spurs. We work it back again. Bentancur, as we've kind of come back into that settled shape. Danso as that left-sided centre-back. Porro deeper in that right-back role. Udogie that outlet on the left-hand side. Little combination with Mikey Moore. Doesn't quite work out. You can see what he's trying to do though. Bounce that ball into Moore, who kind of comes into that left-sided 10 position. Wants to find the ball back to Udogie to go around the outside. Doesn't quite work out. But again, Spurs win the ball back and go back into that 3-2-5 shape. And then again, in terms of doing that, you're enticing the team back onto you, obviously, in terms of pressing. And Spurs, again, showing that they're not afraid to go long and be more direct, as you see in this example here. That variety in the way in which we build up. It's low, it's slow, it's patient, but also the reason that you're doing that is because you're drawing them in to find that space. Johnson, brilliant run in off that right-hand side. He was holding the whip for a lot of it, but he will make those kind of central runs to get him behind. Doesn't quite work out for Spurs, but Devine joins him, tries to get a shot across goal, doesn't quite work out. So again, good variety from Spurs, but it's a very similar structure all the time, trying to get into this kind of position, 3-2-5. Romero here, again, just being patient, just luring them in and creating the space. Mikey Moore, you can see, kind of drops into that pocket where he likes to operate. I see Mikey Moore's future kind of as a 10, but actually playing off the left wing in this kind of system like this with a fullback that wants to go around the outside and hold the width in Destiny Udogie is massively going to suit his game. I think it's massively going to suit Matisse Tell's game. I think it's going to suit Son's game if he was to stay as well. And we'll come on and talk about Son, because I think the way that he was used in that second half isn't really playing to his strengths, but there is a question mark about whether he's actually going to be here next season, and we'll talk about that when the time kind of comes. But Romero here, again, enticing them in, being patient, waiting for the gap to appear. Moore gets in that pocket and drives forward. Udogie kind of around the outside. There isn't really necessarily a crossing option here. Mikey Moore could play it a little bit in front of him, where Udogie can whip that ball across the face of the 6-yard box. You can see Johnson is ready kind of to attack that back post, but it doesn't quite materialise there for Spurs. And we go again. You can see here the same shape, 3-2-5, patient build up. Romero luring in, putting his foot on the ball as he so often does, just moving them around. You can see the fluidity in the shape. Devine at the bottom of your screen there, kind of peeling out to the left-hand side. That freedom of that number 10 in this system, like Damsgaard did have on both sides. That freedom to kind of roam, that license to roam. He chops back inside, again, bounces it off Bentancur into Sarr, and again, they're looking for that little clip ball, being direct to try and attack that space in behind that Reading have left. Again, doesn't quite work out for Johnson, but the right idea is there. Final couple of examples now. Romero, excellent line-breaking ability to find Devine in that pocket, tries to slip it into Solanke. Again, similar structure here. Danso is that kind of left-sided centre-back. And one thing that suits him massively as well, when a doggy is pushed up, Moore might drop a little bit deeper, is it gives Danso, when he does receive it, even though he's naturally right-footed on that left-hand side, his strengths in terms of ball progression come massively when carrying it rather than breaking lines with his passing like Romero, which is why he's really suited to that central centre-back role in this kind of setup, this 2-3-5 or 3-2-5, setup. It allows Danso that ability to roam. A doggy high and wide this time, holding the width. Danso drives Spurs forward into that kind of space. Wins the free kick. Once we take the free kick, we play it back and revert nicely kind of back into that shape. And then you can see Romero producing one of his excellent line breakers again to find Devine in this pocket. So really good from Spurs, really encouraging. Massively, for me, encouraging for individual players in terms of Frank using them in a role that gets their best strengths. Frank has been massively in his praise of someone like Pedro Porro in the past when he's been speaking and analysing Tottenham whenever we played against them. He kind of compared him to Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I think using him deeper like this in this kind of role, you get the best out of him, because there will be times where he kind of drifts out onto the right. There will be times where he drifts a little bit more centrally. He can punch these passes through the lines to find Devine in this pocket or more in this pocket, or he can switch the play to Destiny Udogie, who's making these kind of runs. Also, he can go long and hit someone like Dominic Solanke, but using him a little bit deeper. Also, like when Spurs are really high and aggressive up the pitch, you will see this kind of same shape, which means that you're going to kind of see Porro in these kind of areas a little bit, with everyone kind of more ahead of him, which is excellent and bodes well for his ability to get into that half space and cross from that half space, because that is a weapon in Porro's arsenal that we're going to look to obviously use and exploit. But yeah, really good stuff in that first half. So what changed? What changed going into the second half? This was the team on paper. Obviously, we saw Davis at left back, Van der Ven and Vuskovic into centre half, Spence on that at right back, Kudus obviously coming on, Bergvall, Donnelly in the kind of eights. It definitely looked like more of a 4-3-3, Lancashire up top, Son out wide and Vicario in net. And this is kind of what it looked like more in build-up. Again, similar principles, 3-2-5, but definitely more of a 4-3-3, I'd say, kind of on paper, with Basuma at times in terms of that build-up being the lone, more of the kind of lone number 6, with Bergvall operating a little bit more ahead of him, as you can kind of see here in the first example. Bergvall and Donnelly kind of definitely playing as more eights. I think Basuma, you can give Basuma a bit more license if he is to stay, and a bit more trust to kind of be that single number 6, if you like, in build-up, because his ability and his strength to get past players, drop that shoulder, get through the press. Obviously, he's so strong, his frame, he looks after the ball really well. Davis kind of, in this example here, kind of holding the width more as the natural left-back. Spurs have got the option, Van der Ven's got the option to go out to him here, but where they've lured Reading in with the press, they've created the space for Jamie Donnelly as that 8 to drop in and receive. And he pops it off first time to Basuma out wide to Davis. And you can see Son here kind of hugging the touchline. Now, you obviously, one of the main things that changed was the dynamic in terms of how Spurs used the wingers from the first half to the second half, where Johnson on the right was tasked with holding the width while Porro was narrow. Opposite on the other side with Udogie on the left, more kind of coming inside into a number 10 position, dovetailing nicely with Solanke and Devine there. At times, whereas it almost flipped in the second half, and Son was being used more as that high and wide touchline winger like Johnson was on the left-hand side this time, and Spence, in terms of the back 4, again, more of an elbow shape, tucking into a back 3 and build up, but Davis kind of being used as the left-sided centre-half this time, whereas the right-back in Spence was allowed more freedom and more license to go forward, allowing Kudus to come central and operate kind of in that half space on the right-hand side, which massively suits his game. Again, you go back to Thomas Frank and his ability and desire to just profile these players correctly to kind of get the most out of them, to play to their biggest strengths. And that's what we saw here. But it didn't necessarily work for Son, I would say. And I do think that, I know obviously at the moment, Ben Davis isn't the sort of left-back that you want kind of doing the Udogie role, kind of holding the width. Spence, I think, can do that if you want to play Porro at right-back, if Spence was to play at left-back. But I do think maybe we need to sign another left-sided defender that can get up and down on the left-hand side, who can use his energy and engine to kind of hold the width, get up and down and allow our left wingers, who are predominantly suited to playing as inside forwards, more Son, Tel, in different ways, more and more of a creative capacity. Son and Tel in a more direct, getting shots off kind of capacity. Again, you could maybe see Maddison kind of being used as a left winger at times if we are to use a really direct touchline hugging left back. You can maybe see Van de Ven being used at left back as well, someone who demonstrates the physicality to go up and down the pitch and hold width, but also tuck into a back three, allow Porro to go wider. It kind of allows you that versatility and flexibility in game. And again, in terms of the dynamic on that right-hand side, having someone like a Van de Ven there or a Doggy there at left back allows, when you think about Kudus, Johnson and Kulusevski on that right-hand side, they all kind of want to be narrower. Johnson to get in those central areas to attack space, but also Kudus and Kulusevski to kind of carry the ball through those central areas as well. So you can kind of see the dynamics taking shape. It just didn't necessarily work for Son in terms of how he was being used. But again, it's more about trying different things and kind of, evolving from the first half to the second half to see players used in kind of different ways, I guess. So Son was out on the touchline more so than coming inside with Davis, more of a reserved role in an attacking sense. But again, you kind of see it here. Van de Ven is that central centre-back. Vuskovic is that right-sided centre-back. Davis is the left centre-back. Trying to play Sonny in behind, trying to go direct. But again, you want him. I still think you want Son making those out to in runs rather than just trying to hit the space in behind, out on that touchline. Again, you see here more of a 4-2-4 shape in build-up. Van de Ven and Vuskovic. It's 4-2-4 deep. It's 3-2-5 a little bit further up the pitch. Again, one thing it does do though, having Son as that kind of touchline wing, or having a touchline wing on the left-hand side, maybe it suits someone like an Odebear, his game a little bit more. When you do build out and find that space, you can play these balls into Kudus, who wants to peel off that right-hand side to get into those central areas where he is really dangerous. He doesn't drive forward in this example, but he turns back, wriggles away, finds space, but gets a free kick. Again here, you see Donnelly kind of peeling out to that left midfield position, with Davis as that left-sided centre-back. You can see Kudus again operating more centrally, Spence hugging the right touchline, holding the width out to Donnelly. Son does make that kind of out-to-in run as they look to hit Lancashire in that kind of channel, but it doesn't quite work out. Again, Davis here trying that ball in behind to Son, but it just felt like there was one moment with Sonny where he tried to take on that right back, lost the 1v1, lost that duel, and then lost a bit of confidence. And you can kind of see here, it just wasn't really his day. But I think one thing to kind of maybe take away and learn for Thomas Frank in that is you just do want Son more centrally. You do want him in more narrow areas. You do want him kind of attacking that half space with a fullback holding the width beyond him, but also having Son or someone there, without him holding that width, you don't get the opportunity, or Kudus maybe doesn't get the license to operate in that kind of half space when everyone kind of moves over. Spence holding the width in that kind of position, Sonny giving you the width on the other side, or whoever's going to play on that left-hand side, if Spurs do decide to play like this with more of a reserved left back and more of an attacking right back. Maybe that's something to think about. Maybe that's where you use Odebear in those kind of games where you want to set up in this more dynamic, because he is more adept at hugging the touchline and creating from out wide. Sonny just can't really do that. It doesn't suit Tell's game. Doesn't really suit Mikey Moore's game as much either. But some encouraging stuff. Obviously, different dynamics, but similar principles from half to half. Obviously, if we look at the goals as well, really encouraging to score from a set piece. Vuskovic, just that aerial ability, that aerial threat. It's an insane leap. Lancashire at the back post attacking it and scores. Really adept finish from Luka Vuskovic as well for the second goal. The guy is just a monster. I'm really excited and encouraged by him. Good duel winner, that clearance off the line as well. Just really composed on both feet. And again, I think it's going to be a while before he's maybe... I think it's going to be like a Bergvall situation, if I'm being honest, where it's like in pre-season, I was so big on Bergvall. I was like, right, get him in the team ASAP. He's so exciting, so confident, he's so ready. But maybe when you saw him playing those early Premier League and Europa League games, you maybe saw that he probably wasn't. Vuskovic, obviously, it's different, being a defender, lots of experience around him at the back, and obviously playing in a system that gives him a bit more protection compared to maybe coming in under Ange last year. But yeah, it really, really encouraging on debut for him, and the composure on this finish on his weaker foot as well, joke. And Mohammed Kudus is the other player that I kind of want to talk about from an individual perspective, despite the fact that I thought there was some other really good individual performances. Kudus, that new signing, just that, like I said, that dopamine of a new signing making an impact kind of straight away. We've had to wait 2 years to see Vuskovic. We've only had to wait a couple of weeks to see Kudus, but he's in straight away and impressing. What you want to do from a Spurs perspective, I think, when you're kind of when you're building out, is you want to be able to find, if you're going to use Kudus as a bit of an outlet when you're trying to build, you want to find him in these kind of positions, just off the right, where he can dribble and drive through that central area. But again, that unpredictability that he brings in the final third, like Thomas Frank spoke about in the press conference, you don't quite know what decision he's going to make here. He has got the ability to drive inside here, take those two centre-backs on and get a shot off. He also can go outside. He uses Lancashire out on the right-hand side, probably the sensible choice, but you definitely want to be finding him in these kind of pockets when you're building out, because he's so strong in terms of driving the ball forward. If you allow Kudus this much space, you're asking for trouble. If you get close to him, he can knock you off it, he can spin you, he can roll you, all these kind of things, but he's going to be such a difficult player to, I think, to play against from a non-Spurs perspective next season. Again, here, you kind of, the cut back to him, the two-footed nature in which he operates, he could cut in and get a shot off on his left foot, decides to cross with his right, it was blocked. But this was probably the standout moment from him, really. This was when everybody in that away end, including myself, was there yesterday, kind of stood up and applauded, really, here on the byline. In tight areas, like I said, that ability to just get himself out of really difficult situations. You can see here, where's he going to go? Does he risk playing that pass to Bissouma when he's got a man on his back? Does he risk it getting intercepted before it even gets to Bissouma? He's facing the wrong way. Drags it away from the winger there, turns, spins, rolls, commits a player, gets away from him. Little 1-2 with Spence. Question marks about whether it went out. Obviously catches Reading a little bit off guard there with that. Nudged it past him, then the pace to accelerate away. That was just a real highlight for me. That ability to combine and play in tight areas and problem solve and get away from people, and then attack the space that you've been afforded due to being the beneficiary of your own good work, taking players out of the game. And the smart decision as well here, like Son probably goes a bit too early. He could try and slip Lancashire in again. Question marks potentially over offside, but he decides to cut it back to Jamie Donnelly on the edge of the box, who could score, gets a shot off, unlucky for him. This, again, here from Kudus, kind of being found in that half space on the right-hand side. Looks up, sees runners ahead of him, decides to be patient. Little roulette to spin, get away, and then switch the play and to find out Sonny in a 1v1 situation. So, some really encouraging stuff individually from the new signings, but I really like the way in which Thomas Frank wants to set up and build up in this 3-2-5, and I think it's going to be a common principle that we do see in pre-season. We're going to see it tweaked, we're going to see different variations of how this Spurs team are going to play, but on first impression, I really like what I see. Platforming and profiling players correctly to maximise their biggest strengths and get the most amount out of them. Also, just to give you a little bit more security and solidity as a team. I just think it really, really works. Again, League One opposition, you have to take that into a pinch of salt. Take that into account. Take it with a pinch of salt. It's about getting minutes in the legs, but we kept a clean sheet. We scored from a set piece. That is an area that what Thomas Frank wants to focus on as well. But he's changing our build-up, and from what we saw yesterday, I think it's going to cause teams problems. Again, it has to evolve if you want to be less predictable. We saw Roberto De Zerbi's Brighton get found out in build-up over time. They became a little bit stale. It just didn't quite work out. You have to evolve, but Thomas Frank, again, has got a brilliant track record of doing that. But the early signs are encouraging. They're promising, and I hope you enjoyed the video. On to Luton next week. There's going to be a video out this week, potentially tomorrow or Tuesday, where I'm going to be joined by Brentford fan Mike Johnson, where we go through marginal gains. We talk about how Thomas Frank can massively improve Spurs with small tweaks. We've all seen the throw-in auditions. We've all spoken about the set pieces, so it's time to get into the nitty-gritty. So if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe, turn notifications on as well, and I will see you in the next few days. Nice one, up the Spurs.